Rows of tents form narrow corridors. Lanterns swing under the wet wind. Maps cover makeshift tables. Colored pins mark routes, tides, currents, landing points. The canvas walls shudder as gusts sweep in from the channel. Officers move between tents carrying soaked folders. Mud muffles urgent voices, rushed steps, clipped exchanges. Lightning reveals silhouettes bent over piles of documents. Shadows stretching across damp wooden planks. Inside the main command tent, Dwight D. Eisenhower stands facing a large map spread across an entire table. The flicker of a lantern casts uncertain light across the coastline drawn in pencil. Margins are filled with notes. Landing schedules, tide windows, transport capacity, German gun ranges. The wind roars, shaking the ropes outside. An officer steps in, letting cold air cut through the room. The meteorology team is on their way. Eisenhower lifts his eyes. A small tightening of his jaw. No other reaction. He brushes water off the table with one hand and straightens his uniform. Conversations around him fade, as if the tent itself were listening. The entrance opens again. Stagg, Anders, and the small circle of forecasters enter carrying metal cases. Their coats drip onto the floor. Transparent covers protect bundles of charts. They move toward the center. Officers instinctively step aside. Boots sink slightly in the wet ground. Eisenhower looks at each of them. "Show me what you have." Stagg opens his case. He spreads charts across the table. Curved lines, abrupt pressure drops, symbols marking cold fronts tearing across the Atlantic. Wind pounds a tent. The lantern trembles. "The storm is holding, sir," Stagg says, tapping a sweeping arc. "These fronts collided here, then expanded. Winds, high waves, low visibility. If we launch under these conditions..." He stops. The silence completes the sentence. Eisenhower studies the chart. Lightning flashes. Faces around the table tighten. He lifts his gaze toward the forecaster. Any sign of improvement? Stagg hesitates. Anders wipes moisture from another chart and slides it forward. We're seeing conflicting signals. Some models suggest a possible break. Very brief. Eisenhower leans in. "How long?" Anders inhales slowly. 24 hours. Maybe less. Could start before dawn. A wave of murmurs ripples through the tent. Officers exchange quick, heavy looks. The wind rattles every rope outside. Eisenhower pins down the edge of a map with his hand. "I need more than maybe." Stagg closes the case softly. "There is no certainty, General. Not with the Atlantic behaving like this. But if the break comes, it will be the only one for several days. After that, conditions worsen again." He points at the swelling storm pattern. "Miss it, and we may lose weeks." The air inside the tent thickens. Guards at the entrance adjust their grip on the flapping canvas. Thunder rolls across the cliffs. Eisenhower walks between the tables. He touches metal compasses, folded aerial photographs, small wooden markers shaped like defense bunkers. One photo shows a jagged coastline, dotted with gun positions. He stops at a crude model of the Normandy cliffs. His fingers rest lightly on the ridge labeled Omaha. The men are in position. He says quietly, "They're waiting." A younger general steps forward. "The channel will tear their craft apart in this weather. The aircraft might not see their targets." Another general adds, "And if the Germans rely on the storm, they'll reinforce where we don't want them to." Stagg interjects, "Sir, the break is possible. We can't promise it, but our indicators align." Eisenhower returns to the main table. He examines the cold front again. The lantern's glow turns the drawn waves into moving shadows. 24 hours, he repeats. A narrow window. The forecasters stand motionless. The tent canvas pushes inward with each blast of wind. "I want detailed wind projections," Eisenhower says. "Every fluctuation you expect, wave height, temperature shifts." Anders opens another bundle. Overlaid graphs show a temporary dip in wind intensity. He circles a small blue-marked region. Here, pressure rises briefly. The wave should settle a bit. Not much. Maybe enough. Cloud cover uncertain. The silence that follows is sharper. Eisenhower rubs a hand over his face, then walks to the entrance. He pulls the canvas aside. The storm slams into the camp, drowning everything in noise. Sheets of rain sweep across vehicles and supply crates. Soldiers run between tents. Shoulders hunch against the wind. Every movement carries a muted tension. He releases the canvas and returns inside. If we launch and the window closes early, it will scatter the fleet, a general says. Aircraft could miss their marks. Troops could land off target. Eisenhower meets his eyes for a moment, and if we don't launch, we lose surprise and give the enemy time to move reserves. The lantern flickers. The tent walls strain against the storm. Stagg steps closer. General, we cannot guarantee success. We can only tell you this. The window exists. Eisenhower traces one finger along the coastline drawn on the map. A handwritten note shows date, hour, tide. Rain intensifies. Officers remain quiet, waiting. The forecasters stand with charts splayed open like fragile shields against uncertainty. Eisenhower closes his eyes briefly. When he looks again, the lantern casts narrower shadows across his uniform. He gathers the papers. Keep monitoring. Bring me updates immediately. Any change, no matter how small. Stagg nods. Yes, sir. The team retreats. The tent slowly fills with movement again. A metal frame clock on a post ticks through long minutes. Eisenhower remains by the map. The wind continues to hammer the canvas. But something in the air holds still. He rests his hand on the spot labeled landing zone, fingers pressing firmly as if measuring the weight of the decision. Night deepens. The storm shows no sign of easing. But somewhere far over the ocean, something shifts. A small movement in the vast dark. A narrow break. A chance drawn as thin as a pencil line across the Atlantic. Before dawn, the storm tightens its grip on the coast. Waves crash against the shoreline with a steady, violent rhythm. The camp sits beneath a shifting mass of black clouds that move low and fast, as if sweeping directly above the tents. Inside the command tent, lamps burn with a weak, trembling glow. Eisenhower enters with steady steps. Officers straighten immediately. A stack of new reports rests on the central table. Rain keeps hammering the canvas. Stagg and Anders return carrying fresh observations. Their clothes drip again, but their pace is faster, more deliberate. Eisenhower nods toward them. What changed? Stagg spreads out a new map. The fronts, drawn in red, have shifted slightly eastward. Pressure readings in blue show uneven rises. The break might still occur, sir, but the larger front is accelerating. Our margin may be shrinking. Eisenhower studies the numbers. How much? Hard to say. Hours, not days. The room absorbs the weight of the statement. Papers rustle as officers shift, preparing mentally for tighter deadlines. A communications officer steps in. General, messages coming from the airborne divisions. They request confirmation on timing. They're preparing equipment now. Eisenhower turns to him. Tell them nothing changes until further notice. The officer salutes and exits. Outside, thunder rolls across the cliffs again. The ground trembles. Eisenhower turns back to the forecasters. Show me wind behavior between midnight and sunrise. Anders unrolls a thin strip of plotted lines. Here, winds drop briefly around this point. The window is narrow, but the downward trend is consistent across our stations. And after that, Stagg traces a rising curve. Everything climbs again. Hard. If the fleet is already at sea, they'll be fighting the storm on the way back. The information settles into the room like cold air. Eisenhower steps away from the table. He walks slowly to a corner where aerial reconnaissance photos cover a board. He looks at the beaches. Utah, Omaha, gold Juno sword. Lines of obstacles like dark teeth across the sand. Barricades angled toward the tide. Trenches carved behind dunes. He speaks without turning. If we delay too long, the moon phase shifts. The tides change. The Germans strengthen their defenses. A general approaches. Sir, the men are ready. They've rehearsed every step. But if visibility stays this low, paratroopers could jump miles from their targets. Another adds, and the landing craft will struggle to maintain formation. If they scatter, each beach becomes a separate fight. Stagg stands firm near the table. The window is real, General. We see the signs. But it's thin and it's tightening. Eisenhower nods. When do you expect the next major observation? Within the hour. Our ships offshore are sending updates. The tent door swings open again, this time with a burst of cold rain. 2 officers rush in with field notes. One hands Eisenhower a clipboard. Reports from the channel. Sir, conditions worsening. But crews say the wind shift they expected hasn't arrived yet. Eisenhower reads quickly. Could the delay indicate the break is forming earlier? Anders exchanges a look with Stagg. It's possible. If the front slows just enough, the smaller high-pressure ridge could slip through. Stagg moves closer to the map. If that happens, sir, the window might actually widen for a short period. Not much, but enough to launch. The tension in the room tilts. Officers straighten. Boots stop shifting. Eisenhower's gaze fixes on the map. He presses a finger against a narrow stretch of coast. I need your best estimate. Right now. Stagg answers immediately. The window is still likely. Anders adds. And if it appears, it will be the only one. Everything else collapses around it. Eisenhower steps back from the map. His breathing is even, slow. He looks at the tent poles, shaking under the force of the wind. He turns to his chief naval officer. How long does the fleet need to deploy? Hours, sir. They must start soon if we intend to hit the beaches at first light. And the airborne? They need confirmation immediately. They have no margin left. Eisenhower returns to the map. He studies the markings again. His hand rests near the penciled note, H+0. A sudden gust shakes the tent. Lanterns flicker, casting distorted shadows on the canvas walls. The storm outside erupts in a series of rapid cracks of thunder. A messenger steps in, soaked to the bone. General, emergency update from our station near the coast. Eisenhower takes the message and reads it carefully. The lines are short. The ink is smudged from moisture. Wind shift detected. Unexpected rise in pressure. Visibility improving slightly along the western edge. He looks up. This is a break? Stagg steps closer, scanning the note. It could be the start of one. It matches what the models hinted at. We need confirmation from the offshore vessels. As if on cue, a radio operator bursts into the tent. General, transmission from patrol ship Alpha 2. Pressure rising. Wind angle shifting northwest. Wave still high but decreasing. The room reacts in a low, controlled wave of movement. Eisenhower walks to the radio table. Read the last line again. The operator checks the message. Conditions unstable but trending towards short calm. Eisenhower turns. The meteorologists stand ready. Officers wait motionless. Outside, rain continues, but its rhythm feels different, lighter, as if the storm hesitates. Eisenhower points to Stagg. How long until the calm reaches the channel? Stagg spreads a chart on the table. If the trend holds, it could arrive in a few hours. It won't last long, but long enough. Eisenhower looks around the room. No one speaks. Every face waits for a single direction. He turns back to Stagg. And after the window closes, Stagg answers plainly. The storm returns, stronger than before. Eisenhower closes the message in his hand. He walks to the entrance again and lifts the canvas flap. The storm has not vanished, but something in the air feels shifted. The wind has changed pitch. The horizon, though still dark, shows a faint, uneven clarity. He lets the flap fall and steps back inside. Prepare all commanders. Do not issue the final order yet, but they must be ready to move on a moment's notice. Officers rush toward the exit, shouting instructions through the camp. Lamps bob in the darkness as runners spread the word. Eisenhower turns to the meteorologists once more. Stay here. Keep watching. Every minute counts. Stagg and Anders nod and immediately study their instruments again, marking new readings, adjusting predictions. Eisenhower returns to the map. The storm still rages outside, but inside the tent, something has shifted. The pressure of time presses in on him from every side. Men train in the darkness. Ships wait offshore. Aircraft stand fueled. Thousands of soldiers grip their equipment, staring at the night sky. The window is forming somewhere far over the ocean, thin, unstable, and approaching fast. The storm holds to the early hours, but the rhythm of the wind changes. The gusts lose their sharp edges. The sea remains violent, yet its roar shifts tone as if pulling back from its own fury. Inside the command tent, Eisenhower stands alone at the main table. Maps cover every surface. The lanterns cast long streaks of light across the markings. He rests both hands on the wood, steady, unmoving. The tent flap opens slightly. A young officer enters. General, the senior staff is assembled and waiting. Eisenhower nods but does not move immediately. He closes a folder in front of him, straightens, and walks out into the shifting darkness. The staff meeting takes place in a larger tent reinforced with extra poles. Officers gather around a long table. Charts lie stacked on one end. Coffee cups sit untouched. Their faces hold the strain of hours without rest. Eisenhower enters. Conversations stop. Updates. Stagg steps forward, adjusting his glasses with hands that shake only slightly. Sir, the offshore vessel confirmed rising pressure. Wind readings are stabilizing. The trend continues toward a temporary calm. Anders adds, visibility won't be perfect, but it should improve enough for transport and aircraft navigation. Eisenhower studies the forecasters. Confirm should. Yes, sir, Anders replies. Should. A general at the far end of the table leans forward. If we're going to launch, this is it. The fleet must get moving now. Another general interrupts. But if the break collapses early, we'll send men into chaos. We could lose formations before they even see land. Tension thickens between them. Papers slide across the table as arguments build. The airborne divisions are already at full readiness. The channel is still rough. It may calm just enough at the surface, but deeper swells could throw boats off course. We cannot delay another day. Every hour increases enemy readiness. Voices overlap. Hands point at maps. Boots scrape against the floor. Eisenhower remains still. He watches each argument without reacting. His face carries no dramatic tension, only focus. He raises one hand. The room falls silent instantly. The facts. He points to Stagg. Stagg opens a portfolio. If we act during the window, we have workable wind levels, reduced wave height, and partial visibility. It is not ideal, but it is feasible. Anders adds a second sheet. And once the window closes, the storm returns at full strength. We won't get another chance for days, possibly longer. A naval officer steps forward. The fleet can depart within the hour. It will be tight, but they can make the schedule. An airborne commander speaks next. My men are waiting. They understand the risks. They're ready. Another general counters. Ready or not, they must reach their drop zones. If they scatter, the entire operation loses cohesion. Arguments rise again. Eisenhower listens without turning his head. Finally, he steps toward the table. Everyone out except Stagg, Anders, and the senior commanders. The room empties quickly. Boots splash through puddles outside. The tent flap closes. The wind hums just beyond the canvas. Eisenhower faces the remaining group. Gentlemen, if we proceed, thousands of men will enter that channel in darkness. They will trust that we judge the weather and the risks correctly. He looks at Stagg. I need you to tell me your confidence level again. No hesitation. Stagg takes a breath. Sir, I believe the break is real, and I believe it will be enough. Eisenhower asks, and you? Anders speaks without looking at his notes. I agree. This is the moment. Eisenhower shifts his attention to commanders, and if the storm returns early, a naval officer answers. Then the fleet will fight through it. Sir, but if we stay in harbor, we lose the initiative entirely. The airborne commander adds. Men are trained for uncertainty, but they can't fight without orders. Silence returns. The tent creaks under shifting wind. The lantern sways slightly, throwing new shadows across the map. Eisenhower walks around the table. He stops at a folded photo of the landing beaches. He lifts it slowly and studies the thin line of coastline. He places the photo down again. If we call this off, we delay the strike against fortified defenses. We lose momentum. We signal hesitation at the worst possible moment. He glances at the forecasters once more. "And you're certain enough that we will get this break?" Stagg answers carefully. "Sir, in war and weather, certainty does not exist. But in my professional judgment, yes, this is our chance." Anders nods in agreement. Eisenhower stands completely still. He grips the edge of the table with both hands. The tent quiets as if listening. The generals wait. The forecasters wait. Rain beats lightly on the canvas, no longer violent, as if the storm itself holds its breath. For several long seconds, Eisenhower does not move. Then he steps back, letting go of the table. Prepare the final briefing. The commanders exchange glances, but do not question him. They exit to arrange the meeting with division leaders. Footsteps echo outside. The sound fades into the wind. Only Stagg and Anders remain for a moment. Eisenhower looks at them. "You're carrying a heavy burden today." Stagg answers with steady eyes. "Sir, if these men are going across the channel, we want them to have the best chance possible. That's all we can give." Eisenhower nods once. "Then let's give it to them." The forecasters leave the tent. Outside, runners shout directives. Lamps flicker across the camp as officers move toward briefing tents. Engines rumble from trucks transporting materials. The entire area shifts into organized motion, as if waking from hours of paralysis. Eisenhower walks alone through the camp. Soldiers stand under sheltering tarps, adjusting gear. Some sit on crates cleaning rifles. Others tighten straps on their packs. None speak loudly. They feel the change. Something in the air signals movement. He passes a group of paratroopers. They pause and look at him. Eisenhower returns the look with a slight nod. No speech, no reassurance. Just acknowledgement. In another area, medical team sort supplies under dim lamps. A chaplain stands quietly near a jeep, waiting for requests. Eisenhower continues walking until he reaches a ridge overlooking the distant shoreline. The sea thrashes below, but not with the same wild force as before. The storm still churns, but its edge feels different, thinner, like a curtain pulling slowly aside. He watches the horizon. No rays of light pierce it yet, but he notices a faint shift in the clouds, a subtle opening. Behind him, the footsteps of an officer approach. "Sir!" The commanders are assembled. Eisenhower turns. The time for reflection is over. The turning point has arrived. He walks back toward the command tent, the storm easing just enough to reveal what lies ahead. A narrow window, a brief calm, a moment that will decide everything. The briefing tent fills before dawn. Lanterns hang from crossbeams, shaking with every gust. Commanders from every division take their places around a long table. No one sits. Every man stands straight, waiting. Eisenhower enters. Conversations stop instantly. He walks to the head of the table, places both hands on the wood, and looks at each commander one by one. The storm outside rumbles, but no longer dominates the air. The tent feels suspended in a moment just before motion. He begins. "Gentlemen, we have a weather window. No theatrics. No rise in voice. Just the sentence." It hits the room like a shock. Stagg and Anders stand near the map. They unfold the latest chart. Stagg points to a narrow band over the channel. Conditions improving. The calm will not last long, but it will be enough to launch. A ripple moves through the commanders. Shoulders shift. Boots adjust. Every man understands the meaning instantly. Eisenhower continues. The fleet departs within hours. Airborne units will move first. Landings at first light. A general speaks quickly. "Sir, the men have been waiting for this word. They'll move fast." Another commander adds. "They'll want reassurance. They'll want to know you believe this will work." Eisenhower's eyes stop on him. Belief won't get them across that water. Orders will. He pauses for half a breath. And they now have them. The room stiffens in collective awareness. The decision is final. Stagg steps forward, clearing his throat. "General, one last update." Eisenhower nods. Stagg unfolds a slip of paper. Pressure rising faster than expected. Visibility slightly better along the western approach. The window is holding steady. The commanders react with a silent wave of tension releasing from shoulders. Eisenhower only nods once. Good. He turns toward the entire group. Carry the orders. Move your men. The commanders disperse with sharp salutes. Boots hit the ground outside in rhythmic patterns, spreading across the camp like rolling thunder. Lanterns swing as men sprint into the dark. Eisenhower remains inside the tent for a moment. The flap opens as officers hurry past. The air tastes different. Not calm, just clearer. Focused. He steps outside. The camp has transformed. Trucks start engines. Radios crackle with coded transmissions. Runners weave through rows of tents delivering final instructions. Soldiers tighten chin straps, adjust equipment, and form loose lines around supply stations. The airborne troops gather near transport trucks. Their parachutes lie packed and ready. Equipment straps snap under quick. Practice hands. Eisenhower walks past them. Heads turn. A soldier speaks quietly. "Sir, we're ready." Eisenhower stops, meeting his eyes. "Good luck." No speech, no dramatic tone. Just a simple statement. The soldier nods, gripping his gear. Farther ahead, he reaches a clearing where generals cluster near jeeps, giving final notes to their staff. The storm clouds above continue to shift, splitting just enough to form a narrow passage of lighter sky above the ridge. Metal ramps clang as equipment is moved. Tarps flap. The wind presses against uniforms. Suddenly, a messenger rushes toward Eisenhower. "General, new radio message from the channel." Eisenhower takes a slip. Wave height decreasing. Wind angle steady. Visibility increasing slowly. He looks up from the message. Officers nearby exhale in visible relief. Some close their eyes briefly, not from emotion, but from recalculating the odds in real time. Eisenhower pockets the message and moves toward the transport area. A small group of officers follows him. "Sir," public reaction will be immense once word spreads. They'll want results immediately. They'll expect clear progress by morning. Eisenhower stops walking. The officers halt behind him. The public will get one thing: our men doing their duty. Nothing else matters now. He resumes walking. At the edge of the camp, headlights flicker through mist as long columns of vehicles align, preparing to move toward the airfields. Engines rev, soldiers climb aboard, gripping rifles in gear. Some glance out at the sea beyond the hills. The waves still rise, but no longer violently. The storm's rage has thinned into something quieter, almost confused. Eisenhower climbs a small incline overlooking the movement. The scale of the operation unfolds. Trucks advancing in rows, officers shouting orders, medics loading supplies, engineers checking equipment. The air hums with controlled urgency. An officer approaches from behind. "General, they're asking for final confirmation at the airfield." Eisenhower answers without turning. "Go. Tell them the order stands." The officer salutes and runs. Below, the headlights create a slow-moving river of light. Soldiers ride with helmets down, rifles between their knees, staring ahead. Some tap the sides of the trucks nervously. Others sit motionless, conserving energy. The wind blows across the ridge. Eisenhower watches the horizon. The clouds shift again. A thin line of lighter gray splits the sky, where darkness was solid moments before. Steps approach behind him. It's Stagg. He stands beside Eisenhower, without speaking for several seconds. They both watch the sky. Stagg finally says, "Sir, the break is happening exactly where it needed to." Eisenhower's eyes remain on the horizon. "Good." Stagg starts to leave, but Eisenhower speaks again. "You understand the weight your forecast carries." Stagg looks at him. "Yes, sir. Every line on those charts leads to the men down there." "I'm aware." Eisenhower nods once. "Then let's make those lines count." Stagg walks back toward the tents. The morning inches closer. The storm's voice softens into a distant rumble. The sea still churns, but the wind now carries a steadier rhythm. The first aircraft engines ignite at the far end of the field. Their hum rises, deep and unwavering. Eisenhower turns toward the sound. A long row of transport planes waits, wings glistening under scattered drops of rain. Ground crews move in a practice flow, signaling, loading, checking. Paratroopers line up outside each aircraft, performing final gear checks. A single flare rises into the sky, marking readiness. The camp reacts instantly. Officers shout. Mechanics move. Pilots climb cockpit ladders. The narrow weather window is here. Everything is aligned. Eisenhower steps forward until he stands at the edge of the takeoff strip. Soldiers and officers part to make room. He watches the first aircraft begin moving, wheels rolling through shallow puddles. A second follows, then a third. Engines roar against a fading storm. The operation is no longer a plan on paper. It lives. It moves. It begins. Behind him, whispers spread through the ranks. It's happening. They're going. God, look at them. But Eisenhower does not turn. His eyes stay fixed on the departing aircraft. The sky opens just enough to reveal a narrow stretch of lighter air. The window is real, and the world is about to feel its impact. The beach stretches empty under the pale morning light. Tracks, footprints, broken crates, and twisted metal are scattered across the sand. Waves push in and pull back, erasing lines that seemed permanent hours before. Small groups move slowly between debris. Officers collect papers, tags, waterlogged maps. At the top of the bluff, Eisenhower stands still. Below him, crews work in quiet motion, stripped of urgency. He grips the brim of his cap. The metal pin shifts in the wind. A jeep waits behind him with the engine off, 2 guards standing beside it like statues. A courier approaches with a folder of reports. Eisenhower holds it for a moment, then hands it back. Later, the courier nods and leaves. Eisenhower steps closer to the edge of the bluff. The horizon is clear. Distant clouds sit spaced apart like ships anchored far from shore. Soft waves roll in steady rhythm. He closes his eyes briefly, breathing in the salt. Footsteps approach. Stagg stops a few meters away, silent. Eisenhower turns only enough to acknowledge him. You came. Eisenhower says, I thought I should. The general gestures for him to join. Stagg moves to the side. The view opens wide, unbroken. Birds circle above the rocks in sharp arcs. Doesn't look like the same place as yesterday. Stagg says, No, it doesn't. They remain quiet. The sea fills the silence. Foam washes over jagged iron stakes left half buried. Was there any other way? Eisenhower asks. Stagg studies the water. Not with the window we had, he says. Not with that storm line. Not on that timetable. Eisenhower walks a few steps along the ridge. You know many will still doubt. I know. They'll say we could have waited. Maybe they will. But the atmosphere doesn't wait. And it doesn't bargain. Eisenhower looks down. Engineers hammer loose the remnants of steel traps. Each strike echoes up the cliffs. When you walked into that room with the 24-hour break, Eisenhower pauses. It didn't feel possible. Stagg's eyes remain on the horizon. I didn't think it was possible either, but it was there. And if you've been wrong, Eisenhower asks, then I'd be here anyway. Same responsibility. The general clasped his hands behind his back. This operation didn't hinge on one decision. It hinged on thousands. But yours, he exhales. Yours opened the door for all the others. Stagg doesn't respond. Eisenhower moves again. Stagg follows. The terrain forces him to step around rocks and uneven patches. A jeep rolls down a wider path, dust lifting behind it. Eisenhower stops next to a pole where a temporary flag rises and falls with the wind. He watches it move. You know what I remember most? He asks. Stagg waits. The silence before I spoke. Every officer staring at the table, as if the wood could answer for me. I remember clock. Stagg says. The second hand looked stuck. Eisenhower looks back to the beach. I said, okay, let's go. I've been replaying those words ever since. It was simple. Stagg says, it needed to be. A line of soldiers climbs a bluff, carrying crates and cables. The first salutes. Eisenhower returns a gesture and follows him with his eyes. They trusted us, he says quietly. All of them. They always trust, Stagg replies. What changes is what we do with it. They continue walking. The wind shifts slightly, brushing across open ground. Ahead, trucks wait to haul documents and recovered gear. Eisenhower pauses near a row of helmets on the ground. A soldier wipes sand from each one, exposing dents and cuts. Where are these from? Eisenhower asks. Eastern Sector, sir. Cataloged. Yes, sir. The general nods and steps away. After a few meters, he speaks again. Stagg, do you think anyone will ever understand what happened here? The meteorologist releases a slow breath. Not all of it, he says, but maybe enough that every choice depended on another before it, and together they shaped this day, even the smallest one. Eisenhower studies him for a moment, then turns toward the Jeep. The driver waits. The general rests his hand on the door, but doesn't get in yet. He looks out over the water one last time. The world will call this courage, he says. But in the end, it was a race against something no one can see. He waits for Stagg's reaction. None comes. And we won for one day, Eisenhower continues. Just one. He climbs into the Jeep. The engine starts softly. Stagg steps back. Eisenhower looks at him through the window. Thank you, he says. The Jeep pulls away, rounding a bend and disappearing behind the rocks. The wind keeps blowing from the sea. The flag on the bluff continues its steady motion. Stagg remains where he stands. He looks at the sky. Clouds drift without threat. The waves hold their rhythm. Nothing betrays the violence of the hours before. He breathes in. Crews finish their work. Trucks roll out. Voices fade. The shore returns to quiet. Stagg faces the horizon again. The 24-hour break is gone. The rare opening that changed history has closed forever. Yet he stays, watching the thin blue line as if searching for a reason hidden somewhere inside it. There is no answer. Only the wind, only the water, and the day moving forward, carrying a secret the world will never fully uncover.